Today to welcome Jason Wang from Ubisoft. Jason is Singaporean. He's currently working at Ubisoft Singapore. He is a gameplay programmer where he designs games, and he'll share more about what that actually means, designing games as a software engineer during his presentation. He started at Ubisoft after he graduated from university. He studied computer science at DigiPen Institute of Technology, which is, I think, does a collaboration with Singapore Institute of Technology, SIT. And before that, he was studying at Temasek Polytechnic in doing a diploma in game and entertainment technology. Very excited to meet Jason, to have Jason here today. I met Jason through a mutual friend at a gathering a few months ago, or met the mutual friends we were gathering a few months ago, and it was just a whole bunch of game developers. So super excited that Jason was open and willing to share with us. So thank you so much, Jason, for being here, and we will let you take it away.
All right, cool. I will get started. Thanks for having me. I'm here to share about my experience working in Ubisoft and some of what you can expect as a gameplay programmer, right? So maybe just a short introduction about me. My first game was a game that you play on the DOS box. I'm not sure if any of you know this, but it was this game called The Incredible Machine. So this is a puzzle game. So I think this was like when I was 5 or 6-ish, and then my dad would load up the DOS game, and then I would like go at it for hours. Yeah, and then my first time programming was creating not to say creating, but tinkering with like private servers for MapleStory. I don't know if you, I think this is quite popular back then, but it was like an open source project, and it was written in Java. And then people back then, GitHub was like still a new thing. I think that this was back in like 2009, and so I just kind of took it, spun up like a server for it, and then like played around with it for my friends. Yeah, so most of the programming were mostly just like configuring stuff, fixing some small behavior issues here and there. Yeah, and then as Kairan has mentioned, studied in Temasek Poly in games and entertainment technologies, and then moved on to DigiPen Computerscience in real-time interactive simulation. And currently I'm now working in Ubisoft. So I graduated in 2019. I worked as a UI programmer intern for about 6 months, working on like UI topics, and then moved on to gameplay programmer after that. Yeah, so it's been almost about 3 years with Ubisoft now. And mostly we work in C++. So not sure if any of you are familiar with that, but it's okay. So just to talk about some things that I noticed from indie experience versus a AAA. So I have to admit that my indie experience is not really indie per se, but it's like during my my time in DigiPen, and then our curriculum, we had to create like a game every year, like from scratch, and work in like kind of teams to kind of create this game. So that will be where I'm drawing my indie experience from. So just a quick breakdown of indie versus AAA. For indie, you have to be jack of all trades. You know a lot of stuff. You need to know how to set up the project. You know how to what kind of architecture you want to use, what kind of technology you want to use. As compared to AAA, you're usually the go-to guy for a few features, like specific features, and then people will come to you for that, for issues or to discuss about certain topics revolving that few issues that you have. And then also for indie, you manage yourself. There's not much production help, although I know that some of the indie, the more established indie companies, they do have this kind of production personnel to kind of push things along the production pipeline. And just to make sure everyone's on track and such. And then in AAA, there's a lot of a lot of managers managing a lot of stuff, and a lot of the managers they manage like your specific feature, and then they collaborate with like the other teams, and to kind of just help you all collaborate more efficiently. And then for indie, it's because of this, you have your flexibility versus inflexibility. Indie, you want to make changes, you can just make the change, and then maybe like quickly get someone to check it out, and then okay, you can submit this into like a main working branch where everyone is using. Whereas in AAA, there's a lot of process that goes into like, even before you want to start working on this specific change, you need to get productions approval, need to check with your manager, need to perhaps like discuss on the potential implications and all sorts of stuff, because there's just too many systems, too many people working on the same thing also. And this then impacts the iteration speed. So fast and versus slow. So just some common challenges that I feel is common between as a software engineer in general, is basically to maintain code quality. So code quality comes into play a lot when you are sharing code with other people. People must be able to read your code. They must be able to understand. You must be able to understand your code 10 years down the road when you're in some other company, and they'll be looking at this piece of code and be like, who is this and who wrote this code and what the hell is he doing? Yeah. And then also as a programmer, you have to kind of manage expectations in the sense that you are the tech guy for the team, right? So for specific features, they go to you for specific advice on whether something can be done, whether we have the technology to support this, or whether we can even be done or not, whether it's technologically feasible. Yeah, so this is managing the expectations of others. And then as you write your code, you have to design it to be friendly, which kind of brings it to maintain code quality. But this is more for when you create something, and then you have to think about this kind of design implications on whether it's flexible to be changed in the future, or is it if you design this system in a certain way that the designers can quickly iterate with the data or something, somewhere along those lines. Yeah, and then basically, yeah, delivering your design requirements. So for features, usually your game designers, they will come up with a draft of what they envision, and then you have rounds and rounds of discussions, many iterations, and then to finally deliver something based on some design requirements that everyone has agreed upon. And then lastly, of course, everyone is in the business to make games in Ubisoft, so making the game fun would be a common challenge. Right. So just to back up a bit, go back to the indie. So for indie, for the project that I'm gonna be gathering my experience from is my final year project, actually. So this is a game that we did with a team of 8, created engine from scratch, and then this was like a Singaporean team where, I don't know if you can tell, but this is like BMT, and then it's like a tower defense slime shooter kind of game. It was quite fun to make, and then we learned a lot of stuff from it. It was great. Okay, so basically, like some of the challenge, like let's say making an engine from scratch, right? So what makes a game engine? A game engine is basically several layers. So you start from the operating system, and then you have all these operating system calls, like from your Windows operating system. You can do things like request for a window to open, request for buttons, or there's like some system specific stuff that you need to use. So this will be written on the operating system layer. And then you have your interface with all your other systems, like your input for your mouse, keyboard, controllers, your file systems to read in files, your rendering system to interface with the graphics card to draw pretty pictures. So you have your different APIs here, like DirectX, OpenGL, and the Vulkan. And then you also have audio subsystems to do like funky audio stuff that you want to do. So you can be like positional audio, or you want like audio modulation. Yeah, so there are usually third-party APIs for this, so like Fmod, Wise. And then when you make your game, usually you want to have some sort of scripting system so that you can iterate fast. So scripting is usually something that you can change in runtime, and then change the logic in runtime, and then it will compile on the fly, and then you can see the changes without having to restart the whole game all over again. So you have things like your Lua script, and sometimes you have your Python to kind of bind into your engine. And then these are like your other miscellaneous game systems for like UI, physics. And then depending on what kind of game you make, your game loop would be different. So like it can be like turn-based game, or it can be FPS, third person, right? And then after that, at the end of the day, then you make your game logic, which is like that. Like so for example, like a FPS game, on the left you have your driving simulations in the center, and then you have your strategy games on the right. Yeah. Yeah, so all these kind of things, I mean, that they are very fundamental issues that you have to deal with. Of course, nowadays you have open source or like third-party software like Unreal Engine, Unity, all these kind of things, which you can use to actually make your games, which actually speeds up the production time a lot. So that's why a lot of new indie studios, they use these kind of things, So things you like maybe think about is like how you want to create your game, how your code is, how do you design your code around the behavior of the game. So things like is your player a gun, or your player uses the gun, that kind of thing, So very, very fundamental programming issues lah. And then yeah, so next, just moving on to talk about AAA stuff. So yeah, so AAA or Ubisoft in general, the technology stack is more mature. You have a lot of people working on the same technology for many years, like 10, 20 over years. And then, sometimes you can look back at the file history, and then you're like, wow, this was written in like the year 2000 kind of stuff. It's like you uncovered some ancient artifact, that kind of thing. And then yeah, and then they share, and because of that, they share the technology amongst all their games, and then where to try and like speed up the iteration for specific games that are trying to speed up or something like that. Yeah, and then yeah, you individually focus on specific topics like I mentioned, but also a good point I feel is that there's a lot, because you have more people, right? You have more budget, hire more people, so you have more people sometimes working on the same topics. So they kind of account for the buzz factor, which is kind of like if one person is down, and you can go to another person to look for, which I feel in a indie scenario is not really that feasible, because a lot of the people will be more spread out over the work, over all the work they have to do, Yeah, so and then for AAA also, you have to do a lot of like documentation to share this information, because you don't want 10 people to kind of talk to you, and then each of them take up like 10 minutes of your time, and there's like 1-2 hours of your time gone, which you can be used to do other more productive stuff. So usually these kind of things is they will ask you for something, and then you say, oh, I wrote this documentation here, you can go and check it out. Yeah, and then also mentioned previously, yeah, so inflexibility in change, working with date and legacy code. So like I said, something written 20 years ago, and then you pick it up and you're like, what is this? You have no idea who wrote this or what it does and whether it should be even part of the game, Yeah. And then of course that comes with navigating a huge code base. Yeah. It can be like millions of lines or like even more than that. Yeah. So okay, so just to move on to what I work on. So I'm currently in the 3Cs team. So this 3Cs is not the Singaporean Cs where you have your cash, condominium, car, or whatever like that. So it's basically like your camera, character, and your controls. So we do with a lot of player-facing stuff. So things to do with like how your gamepad control, you press this and then you move the analog stick, how does the camera move or how does the character move and those kind of stuff. So it's very player focused and yeah, I feel it's a very fulfilling or very fun to iterate on because you are actually playing the thing that you're working on. So yeah, it's good, it's great. So things I work on are like player interactions, the spyglass controls, status effects, camera behaviors. So just to give some examples, like these are some snippets from the recently released game announcement for Skull and Bones, which is the game I'm working on.
Right.
So things like interaction. So you see that prompt popping up, and then you talk to the guy to initiate the dialogue, and then also like the spyglass controls. So we have this feature where you can use the spyglass to kind of get more information on what like the enemy has or what that thing even is. And then also status effects are things like things that apply some kind of effect on another game object. So it can be like setting this guy on fire, so the fire itself is the status effect. So yeah. And then lastly is the camera controls. So like this kind of camera movement. So if you notice, the camera actually pivots or it moves along some sort of like a curve along the ship. So yeah, these kind of things we have to kind of think it through, design, and then to implement the thing in code. Yeah. So just to go into a bit deeper on this specific feature. So just to kind of give an idea of what kind of problems that we solve in as a game programmer. So basically for the camera, so we want to develop this system, right? So where the game designer can designate some path along the ship where the camera will move smoothly and continuously. So you have the ship, and basically the problem is that you have the ship and where should the camera be, right? So going back to traditional camera movement, we know that usually you have your right analog stick, you move the stick and then it turns the camera. So it technically speaking, it adjusts the azimuth values and then the camera reacts to this change, right? So yeah, player input translates to change in camera angles. And so we can define our player input as this camera angle, right? So in pseudocode terms, I understand maybe not all of you understand this, but basically it's just saying that camera angle, you process your camera angle change, and then you give this change to this camera angle to some function, which then gives you the result, the resulting position, right, of the camera. Yeah. So the first iteration or the first kind of simple design that we can do is we just design a set of points on the ship, right? And then you have all this ship and then all these points on around the ship, and then you basically just like draw a line between all of them, and then you end up with this polygonal shape where the camera will then move along like these lines, right? So in more pseudocode. Looks something like that, right? So you have a array of points, and then you pass in this array of points to this function, which then calculates, at this azimuth, at which line I should be at between which 2 points, right? And then which would speed up a position value for you. And then after you think that when you move the camera, it looks very wonky because the camera is very fixed. So you're looking at one side and then suddenly it snaps to the other side. So you iterate some more, and then you go and find out about how to make the curve smooth, right? You don't want to have like a jagged polygonal movement, but you want to have like a smooth curve-like motion, right? So for this, basically we already have I mean, if you study some mathematics, you will know about this Catmull-Rom spline construct. Well, actually, there's a lot of different spline constructs that you can use. And then we basically use this to designs. Basically, we input all of these points that we have, and then it will generate a nice smooth curve for us. So yeah, so that's pretty much like the improvement that we add, right? So in more pseudocode terms, there is like you have a class which computes the Catmull-Rom mathematical function, and then you have your input value, which is usually a ratio from like 0 to 1 or something like that, right? Or I mean, to keep things like simple. Yeah, and then you have your same camera points, you put into this spline object, and then you call this function from the spline, and then it will give you the result position. All right. Whoa. Oh, duplicated. Okay, sorry. Yeah, so that's about it for what I do. So just to talk about what some of the other teams that I talk with, or that are currently in the studio or in the project, or as a whole. So usually, okay, so yeah, so we are making open world games. So we have the world team. So the world team, what they do is they make the world nice, and they make sure that it can be things like the weather system, or it can be things like are things spawning correctly, or things are these are like some things are supposed to spawn only when some conditions are met or something like that. So they basically give life to the world. Yeah. And then there's the activities team, where they come up with things for the player to do, right? So this can be things like quests for you to do, can be like treasure hunt, can be things like like spawning like a rogue pirate or something like that for you to chase or something like that. Yeah. And then we have the online team. So online, a bit broad, a bit general, but basically what they do is they make sure that our game can connect to the internet, right? So make sure that our backend calls to save the player state is correct, to make sure everything is loaded correctly from the internet and all this kind of stuff. And then we have the UI team, which deals mostly with the UI. So they program how the UI works, how it looks, what are some of the behavior it should have, or maybe some animation when you click on this button. Yeah. And then we have the audio team, which deals with audio, right? So they do things like maybe you shoot a cannon, and then there's like some reverberation, right? And then like some echo in the distance kind of thing. So those kind of things you usually have to program the logic into it. Sometimes it's not like necessarily given straight from the APIs that we use, right? So yeah, so they enhance they use this to enhance the experience of the game, right? So some of the more general teams for like in the studio itself. So we have the tools team, which basically develop the tools that we need. So it can be things like the editor itself. We need some specific feature, right? So we will go to the tools team, then they will try and develop it, try and flush it out, and then yeah. So because these tools usually is to increase our iteration speed to make sure that you can work fast, work efficiently, and then to at the end of the day, the goal is to deliver the best experience for the game, right? And then you also have things like your build team, which is your CI/CD. So they maintain, they monitor and they maintain the build configurations, the build status, and whether the latest auto tests or the unit tests are passing, and they're going to hunt down the guy who broke it. This kind of stuff. And then and then you have your data analyst, which works with your game designers to analyze like what are the hotspots in the game. Are people using certain specific items? Are people, how long are they playing for? What's the usual, like how long are they on like sea versus on land, this kind of stuff. So they take this data and then you try and digest it, analyze it, and then to see what features are working, what features are not working. Yeah. So they help us to give visualization on this kind of information. And yeah, and then after that, we also have like people working on full stack, which basically help to maintain or help to build like the player management tools, which they talks to the back end or to retrieve like player profile information, or it can be things like internal tools that we use to manage the game as well. Yeah. And then to like pull up user information or to like develop some stuff for the developers to use. Yeah. So I think that was pretty much all about the current team. So I mean, just to talk about some stuff for the future, right? So why I got into games in the first place is because I feel games, I mean, it's not just about playing games. I mean, you make the game, you try to deliver the best experience, right? But also I feel that games as a whole, right, they try and push the industry for like more performance simulations. So it can be things like let's say your racing game. Usually they try and always develop new car physics simulations that mimic real life as much as possible, but also try and make it while maintaining the game aspect of it, right? So they're always coming out with like new car body simulations, like soft body stuff, this kind of stuff. And then also there's a lot of like emerging technologies that come out from this. Can be things like ray tracing. So like ray tracing wasn't really like that much of a norm until I think 2 or 3 years back, or maybe 4 years back, where they then introduced the hardware accelerators into the graphics card to to push ray tracing. And the purpose is mainly so that we can have a better visual fidelity, right? To make things look more lifelike, to have like proper lighting in the game and those kind of stuff. And then also like so I mentioned like things like Unreal Engine, they develop like recently the new release of Unreal Engine 5, they developed like a new algorithm to draw pretty stuff in a more efficient manner, right? So they tout it as something like you can throw unlimited number of triangles at it and it will still run at like 60 frames per second, or like a acceptable user acceptable rate lah. Yeah. And then and then also Unity also they also developing their own system for like entity component systems, where it's basically just it's a matter of working of designing your system such that you keep data together, so that when the computer they access the data, they're all near each other, so that the access is faster, processing is faster, everything is faster. So yeah, so I mean, this is what I mean by like develop new algorithms for the industry, right? And then also like there are like even for Unreal Engine, right now a lot of people are exploring into other avenues, like using it for architecture visualizations, because you know you can create this world that you can, or this like room that you want to visualize, and then you can go in and then you can walk around in it, and it's just a much better experience than just looking at photos. Yeah, and then there are things like used for movies as well. I mean, if you know the Mandalorian show, the Star Wars Mandalorian, they also use Unreal Engine to draw the background for most of the scenes. Yeah, and then it's actually just a projector on it, and then they have a camera tracker which tracks the real life position of the camera in the game engine, and then which kind of then gives you that, you know, the cinematic shots and stuff. Yeah, and then like reacts to the camera movements. Yeah, so yeah, I think just to summarize everything, talked about indie versus triple A, right? So, you know, indie, you have your you have more things to think about, and then you have less people to manage you, but you iterate faster in the sense, and you have more freedom, more autonomy. And then I mean, I'm not saying that triple A doesn't give you autonomy, but in your work, but as a whole, in the general direction of the game, indie provides you more flexibility with that, right? So after that, I talk about indie challenges, some AAA challenges, talk about some of what developing a game feature, the process might be like, and then yeah, I think that's about it. So I was yeah, and if you want to apply, there's a job portal. You can go to the website. Yeah.
Screenshot that now.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's best that you just apply direct, you know, then it goes through the proper process and stuff. Yeah, so that's all I have for
send
you
you
today.
resumes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that was amazing. Thanks so much, Jason.
Yeah, no problem.
That's great. I think you really gave us insight into, yeah, like programming when building even small and large games. And it's interesting because I hear a lot of parallels between what you're describing between indie versus triple A, and also small startup versus big company or general software engineering as well.
Yeah.
And so it's cool to hear that the similar dynamics also apply within the game industry. And yeah, you showed us, for example, things like how to program camera movements, which is something that seems pretty, you know, when you're playing a game, it seems like, oh, it's just happening. But actually, it's really code, right? It's code, like the code that we're writing every day in our bootcamp and algorithms as well. So that was cool to hear. There are quite a lot of questions. Well, I mean, there's quite some activity in the Pigeonhole. So the link is in the chat. And so I think maybe to segue into the Q&A, what I took away a lot from what you were just presenting was like, oh, actually, like it's just code. Like we're writing code, and games are just code, right? But of course, there's a lot of graphics and the audio and stuff, which has a lot of special skills as well. But the logic of it is still code. Mayank had a question, right? What for most of us here, right, who did not study game development in uni or polytechnic, for example, right, and we're just software engineers, just full stack software engineers who know about algorithms, and we're interested in getting into the game industry, how would you recommend people approach that? Like what languages or technology and any other strategies you would recommend?
Right. So I think this really depends on what kind of game that you want to make, and which would then further lead on to what kind of technology they use, right? So for Ubisoft, because we make games like on the PC, for console, we are very bare metal, very we need to access the hardware quite directly, right? Or to have a lower layer of abstraction per se. So we deal with C++ mostly, right? But for games, like maybe if you were to do mobile games or web-based games, right? They would use I mean their native language. Like I think for mobile, for Android, they use like Java. For Apple, they use their Objective-C, and then for web development, they use like their like HTML5 or like JavaScript stuff. So yeah, it really depends on what kind of games or which kind of like genre of the game that you want to make, right? And then you can try and like focus more on that. But in terms of general like game making, like making games, I wouldn't really say that you need to like know how to make the game. Like if you were to apply as like a entry level, usually what they look for a lot is your fundamentals of the programming language that they're using. And then also whether you're passionate in games at all, right? So whether you make games or I mean sorry, not whether you make, like whether you play games at all or not, or you know what you think about certain games.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, you need
Some of us
to.
could do well at that.
Yeah, I suppose lah. Yeah, it's yeah, I mean, so yeah, like I said lah, it's mostly on, firstly is like what kind of or what platform or game you are targeting, and then mostly they look for people with like passion to create games, right? Yeah, because I mean, you know, there's a not really say rumor lah, but it's quite common that to know that the software engineers here, I mean software engineers in general, they are usually paid okay, but games programmers, they are paid, I think, okay also lah. I think I'm quite okay with my salary also. But in terms of like the general benchmark is lower than average. Yeah. So a lot of the things here is driven by passion and you know, your will to create this kind of experience. And then at the end of the day, you're like, wow, you know, I made this kind of thing. Yeah. So I hope that answers the question.
Mayank, does that answer your question? Where are you, Mayank?
Yeah, it definitely answers the question. I mean, I have to look into what kind of genre of gaming it is, but yeah, it gives a general idea of what to expect.
Oh, he's in Bangkok. Okay. He's out. He's enjoying his trip.
Thanks for the answer, Jason.
Nice.
Yeah, that was great. Okay. Sam had a top voter question. As you're developing your game, how much time do you spend coding? And how much time do you spend gaming or testing or doing other things?
So it's okay, so it depends on, okay, I think this one depends on where you are at in your career, right? So as like a maybe junior to intermediate, I would say you probably spend like 60 to 70% of your time programming, maybe like 20 to 30% on documentation, and then like maybe 10% to test the game. I mean, because you will develop the feature and then at the end, then you will test the game. I mean, you test the feature. So testing is just a way to make sure that you don't break anything. So yeah. In terms of whether like we like just like randomly like, oh, you know, I just want to spend 1 hour play the game and kind of thing. Usually not so much, but we still try to do lah, because at the end of the day we want to make sure that the game that we make is fun, right, for a player. So you try and put yourself in the shoes of the player, and then you spend like a few hours at it, and then you have like multiplayer sessions. Then sometimes we like host like multiplayer sessions, like all of us together, and then try and test like the multiplayer aspect of the game. Yeah. So yeah, I think I think about 70, 20, 10 is about there. It's about there.
Mm.
And then of course, as you move up in the managerial chain, then you spend less time coding, more time managing people, and then probably more time like creating documentation to help other people, right? Yeah. So
And does that answer your question?
Yeah, that was fantastic. Thank you so much.
yeah,
Does anyone have any? I saw that question got a lot of votes. So does anyone have any follow-ups on that question? Nope. Okay. The next there's a group of questions about the work environment. Maybe not at Ubisoft, or maybe I don't know, maybe a specific Ubisoft, but right, like I think this is I think I see where this is coming from. It's like Dylan's question is, how often does an idea coming from a lower level employee will be considered in development? So like people, I guess, have ideas on what kind of games they want to build if they join a company like Ubisoft or another game studio, right? How much agency do we have to incorporate these ideas?
I would say we have some autonomy in the sense that we are tasked to make like a specific feature fun, right? So usually the directors will have their grand plan, grand vision, and then they will discuss with like the lead designers or something like that, right? Like it can be the lead of 3Cs, can be the lead of like world team, lead of activities, and then they'll be like, okay, as a overall grand scheme of things, right? Do this specific feature enhance the value of the game, right? And then sometimes they will make like decisions that maybe you don't agree with, and then I mean you can feedback, you can voice out, and then they will try and like create discussion to address that change or something like that. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's a lot of directorship. I will say that. I mean, that's because I mean, as a programmer, I don't really deal much with the directors directly, so I don't really know. But I mean, this is just my overall sense from what my fellow designers say. You know, there's a lot of. I mean that's what you hire like a director for, right? You engage their experience in like making like past games, and then to try and get their insight on how the game would work together as a whole. Yeah.
Dylan, does that answer your question?
Kinda. I mean, what I was thinking is that a lot of Ubisoft games are. I've been playing a lot of Ubisoft games, and a lot of them are like giant. This whole open world thing where there's like a thing that you go to somewhere. Like at some point, it will feel kind of like stale, right? It's like, change this. Like, why don't you just change a feature to like something else, maybe?
Right.
Like if there's like that kind of input or something, would there still be like the upper management guys? Would they like consider it, and like would they take that into account? Like
Okay, so usually these kind of questions they happen like much earlier on, right? Before anyone even starts a project, you know, they must know what kind of project they want to make, what's their end goal. And then of course, Ubisoft being a big company, they are very profits driven, right? So they need to determine whether there's an audience for this, whether the game will sell, and yeah. But I mean, we do have initiatives to pitch ideas. To like, okay, so our HQ is in Paris, right? So we do have we do like game pitches, and then depending on whether they like the idea, they will say yes or no, basically. Yeah, but you have to basically provide all the information Yeah, it's basically like doing an investor pitch, lah. Yeah.
Right. Sounds like the features need to be very thought through, right?
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, related to that, right? Eric had some questions about the flow, right? For example, like when the team is working, right? What constitutes in one iteration or an update, or how do we know that, how do you break down the tasks into smaller chunks that individual developers can work on, and how do we know we're done for each one of them, for example?
Right. So for this, I think breaking down a task depends on it comes with experience. So usually, at the start also, I was like, oh, this, takes 1 day, but then it took me 3 days kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, this kind of gauge of like, how long a task should take is usually comes with experience. And then for determining when a feature is done or not, it is, so usually before we even start on making the feature, right, we would we have prior discussions, and then we would say that okay, the end goal of this is we want, okay, so like for the camera reel example, right? So at the start we were already like, okay, we want the camera to behave this way. So the end product is the camera should behave this way. Yeah, and then we would create like a first iteration, and then we would submit it into the main, like the main branch that everyone's working on, and then we will have like a review process. So the directors will come in, and then they will say, they will then give their valuable feedback on what they think about it. So and then it can be sometimes you may make things better or or not, or sometimes you can advocate for this kind of changes yourself also. So it's not really say like a top-down management kind of thing. So yeah, and at the end of the day, it depends on whether you have time for it also as well.
Yeah, Eric, does that answer your question about like how the team goes about making the features?
Yep. And I think the question was also pointed at, like, sometimes when we do certain things, like things can always be better, right? As what you mentioned about the camera angle thing, it can always be smoother, it can always be like more real, but I guess we just have to accept certain things at some point. So that was the key of the question. So thanks a lot.
Yeah. And how big is your specific team? I can't remember if you mentioned this, Jason. Like when you're working on but like you were talking about this feature group, you guys review the thing together. How many people are working on that branch?
My immediate team?
Yeah.
You'll be everybody that's working on a project.
Oh, so everybody's like pushing
so
code to the same branch for your feature.
A few hundred, yeah. So
few hundred. Man.
So okay, this depends on the production side of things. So I don't really have too much information on this, but basically, it's like a very standard software engineering process, right? You have like multiple branches where you have your production branch, your development branch, and then your like your staging branch, all this kind of stuff, where you have like all your configurations and stuff. So we have almost essentially the almost kind of same style of working, but we don't split features into their own like this is into like their own specific branch per se. So whatever you submit is free for everyone to test, to play. Then yeah.
Cool. Awesome. I just want to segue a little bit into the interview processes. So you just share whatever you can share. Don't have to give away the questions, but I think many of us are here because they're passionate about game development, and of course, Ubisoft is a great company, and so we'd just love to hear your perspective on what the company looks out for when hiring. Right? Does the company even consider people from alternative backgrounds that didn't study game development in university? And what kinds of things does the team look out for in interviews?
Right. So right. So okay, I think right. I think my interview was fairly easy lah. It was a very simple coding test to ask you to like reverse string or something like that. It's nothing like too elaborate. We don't really I feel we don't really nitpick on like if you know like specific algorithms or that kind of stuff. As long as like your fundamentals of the tools that you're working with is sound, right? I think these kind of things can be picked up as you work along the way lah.
What's an example of such a fundamental?
Sorry, what do you mean?
You're saying like it doesn't matter if you know specific algorithms as long as the fundamentals of
Oh,
tools that you
okay,
use
right.
are sound.
Yeah.
Like what?
Okay, so for
what
like
is-
for C++, right? It can be things like if you know how the memory layout works, or like if you know when you call a function, what happens in the background, like do you use like pointers or do you use like references, and then what happens when you move an object or this kind of stuff. So it is like it's things specific to the tools, I would say. Not so much of like write the whole string library from scratch kind of thing. Or like I want do you know about this like read black tree like hash map or something like that. I mean if you know like if you for things like if you know hash map versus array, right, like what kind of performance implications, this kind of things is would also help lah. Yeah. Those are fundamental data structures, right? So I think for making games, performance really matters. So they need to know whether you know what you're doing. Yeah. But not too much on like like very fancy algorithms or what. Yeah. Because a lot of the things that we do, right, they at the end of the day, I feel they are very fundamentally simple in terms of code, right? You have your your engine already done for you. What you need to do is you just create like components to extend the game behavior. And the game behavior is things like after 10 seconds expire, you execute another function to do something else. That kind of thing is all relatively quite simple as a gameplay programmer. But of course, if you go into like the engine programming, rendering, right, then you need to know more advanced algorithms or like the deeper implications of what a code might affect. So okay, so that's in terms of technical skill for the interview. I think I mean they'll try and find out these kind of things during the interview also. And then I think mostly what's important is that you need to have like you need to be self-driven to know when to ask questions and when not to ask questions, or like know where like to go and like find out the answers for yourself, right? Like to go and ask somebody like when you're stuck. You cannot be like one whole day you see on this problem and then you make zero progress. And then also so that part comes a lot with how you interact with other people. So they look out for, I think, the people skills.
How do they look out for that in the interviews?
I don't know. I mean, they just talk to you. Yeah, like how I'm talking right now. So when I went in, they were like, okay, so what games do you play? Then I was like, oh, yeah. Yeah, and then
done, pass, great.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think generally, I mean, you can talk to other people, you can communicate well, bring your point across, and then that's okay. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. And Dylan has another question about different studios, right? How do you manage? So that was really helpful about the interviews. I'm going to come back to that in a little bit and merge this last question, but Dylan's question was, how do you manage working with different studios of different time zones? Dylan, could you elaborate on that? I mean, I imagine there's just some kind of calendar mechanism, right?
Yeah, I mean, you guys will, I think Ubisoft is a pretty huge entity, right? There are studios in Montreal and like France and everywhere in the world. Like when you're collaborating on a certain game together or something, like how do you like talk to each other with like all these time zone differences? Some, like people might be asleep on one end, they're just awake on the other end and stuff like that.
Right. So I'm still working on it, to be honest. So yeah, like you say, I work with people from like Montreal, which are like 12 hours apart. People from like Paris, people from like Kiev. Yeah, yeah. So basically, when we are knocking off, they just get on, right? And then, of course, you have. So this comes with I guess these kind of things you build with experience, and then you kind of know what kind of topics you can send as like a quick message, or what kind of topics what kind of things that you need to deliver as like an email, and then like include all these other people to get like the fastest response, right, or something like that. Yeah, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't really know how to answer this, but it's a lot. Depends on how much you value your work-life balance. Yeah, sometimes I'm talking to people at like 9, 10, 11, 12 o'clock kind of thing, and and then they are like, I think when it's our like 3 p.m. is their 9 p.m. right? So like it's like towards the end of the day, and then yeah, because and then it also depends on like the topics that you're working on, right? So for game features, game designs kind of things, there's a lot of collaboration that's needed, right? But I think maybe I don't really know for the other job families, but I would imagine it's almost the same for them as well. Yeah, but and with like the whole work from home thing, time just kind of disappears, and you're like, oh, it's 12 o'clock, it's 12 midnight. And then you're still talking to this guy, and like, oh, I want to go and sleep. Yeah, but it's a lot of how you manage your own time and how you want to deliver the message or to communicate with the person. Yeah.
Last but not least, for those of us who are considering game development opportunities in Singapore, other than Ubisoft, what studios do you know of that are also have teams in Singapore that are hiring?
I don't know about hiring, but I only know that there are other studios like Koei or like Gumi. I think Gumi is what the somewhat the next biggest one, because they do like the mobile game, right? And then there's like I think the upcoming one, there's Capcom, and then there's a lot of and there's the what's that, League of Legends, okay, sorry, my brain's Riot Games. Yeah, but I think Riot Games, they are hiring more senior personnel because they're kind of just setting up shop here. So and then there's like plenty of indie studios right here that a lot of people are trying to make their mark in the industry. Yeah, and then I think the biggest somewhat still indie company now is, don't know if you know of the Mighty Bear studio. It's like I think there's also another indie studio, but I think they are fairly big right now. So maybe you can try along there. Or I believe they are like making mobile games or something. So your expertise might be needed there. So
awesome.
Yeah,
we will follow up with you on this. Thanks so much, Jason, for being with us today and for sharing your experiences and your wisdom.